So this is when it came back to my workshop, and that weighed 4.2 tons. So I'll just flick through this quick so you can see the way it reduced down. So basically I had to start work with a 9-inch diamond disc, and I was basically just cutting lines into it and then just using a big sledgehammer just to bash them off, to crack them off. So it's and that's the bottom, the base piece. And then using a jackhammer as well, just to sort of carve pieces off, but it's very, very hard stone, this. And it's basically just made up of fossils. There's, you know, a lot of you saw when I went out. And each of these photos I took, I think it was every 2 days I took a photo. So it was like a couple of weeks work there. Then I turned it over and then did exactly the same to the other side.
When you say a couple of weeks worth, how many hours each day do they get?
About 8 hours a day.
Just solid carving.
Yeah, just using the grinder and then just using that jackhammer to knock all the bits off in a sledgehammer. So I'd work for 3 days, and then I'd have to take 2 days off because it just felt like a giant had just shaken me, and I'm aware that, you know, maybe when I get older I might get arthritis, I don't know. But basically I had to let, and I'm getting older as well now. So
the amount of dust as well, you can see the footprints on the right hand side.
Oh yeah. It was literally, you know, I've got a big respirator and I just had to completely cover up. The dust isn't too bad off this. If you drink a pint, I used to drink like a pint of milk, full fat milk in the morning, and that basically just lines all your tubes and stuff. So if dust does get in, it basically just catches on the milk. That was something someone told me years ago when I was at college. But yeah, basically you just have to wear respirators when you do, you know, at that stage. Yeah, very, very dusty. And I basically just, you know, part of my actual studio practice every night, I call it my housework, and I basically clear up at the end of each day and then just hose down. Just so when I come in next morning, you know, I would have had a pile of rubble like this deep all over my workshop if I'd have just left everything. So I just always, you know, it's part of the sort of studio discipline of just keeping everything tidy. So this is the gradual paring it down. So basically, the sort of comparison I make, it's like skinning an onion. You're just basically taking layers off each time. So I get to a certain point, then I start from one end and just work my way up. Because I was trying to make a kind of cone shape, but you can't really see it. It looks quite straight because of the perspective on that one. But that's when it got to a certain point. I think that was at the end of the day. I looked quite tired and a bit like I've been shaken. So that, yeah, you can see the sort of layers. I start from one end and the other end. And then those kind of marks are using just a point. So you're just literally just hitting it with a point and things break off. But it is quite a nice texture as well. I think I'm going to use a point in the kind of recesses of the top piece, because it does look, you know, it gives that kind of movement. And this is, yeah, starting to get the kind of splashy bits at the top of that shaft. And just going back to how I started to carve that top piece. It's just basically starting from the circle, carving in, and then another layer starting to come off. And then this is lifting the thing into position. There's a friendly farmer down the road who's got this enormous, like, pallet lifting machine that can lift 4 tons. So I was enlisting his services. I've got all lifting equipment myself, gantries and things, but it doesn't go up to the height that I needed for that. And that was at the end of the day, covered in dust. I think that was just before. That's just before I laid it down to deliver it to here. And then we'll go on to the marble. This is the block of marble in the quarry in Italy. And it comes from northern Italy. It's called Pietrasanta Quarry, and it's where Michelangelo used to get his marble from. And I did all the research just so I got that quarry, because I quite fancied having a go. And it's almost pure white, but there's just a little bit of veining in one corner that you can see on the finished piece. And that took, I think, a week and a half to get from Italy to West Wales, and this is just the unloading, and then that's the sort of squared off block in the workshop. Basically, I started, that's the bottom of the piece. I wanted to get that bit done first, and then I had to turn it over. Which is, you know, I just do that with a gantry and lifting gear. And that weighs about a ton and a half at that point. So this is where I started carving in to get the kind of recess for the drop. And I discovered that stuff is very, very, very hard. It's the hardest piece of stone I'd ever, it's like trying to carve solid glass or something. And I was told that when it comes fresh out of the quarry, it's as soft as butter, and then it hardens up over time. But that, and I was thinking, well, if that's soft,
You don't want to think what's hard.
when it does go hard, it's going to be, you know, it will last forever. So then after I'd carved that bottom piece, I turned it over, and then this is marking out the top section. So again, it's just like using a grinder just to go down, and then knocking out that first layer, then sort of travelling down the sides. It's not very clear, yeah, and I filled up, I think, 5-ton bags of rubble, and luckily a friend of mine wants that for hardcore for his driveway, so I've
Marble in his hardcore for his driveway.
Oh no! all the marble pieces I've actually hung on to, because I worked out that every cubic centimetre of that piece of marble, I think it's cost me about 3 pence. Every cubic centimetre, so anything that came off it, I've kept and bagged up, because I can either use it in the future, or, you know, there's already a couple of people who've said, oh, you know, can I have a couple of bits, because I make jewellery, and now all they've got to do is buy all the diamond equipment to cut it. Yeah, all of that rubble is from the shaft section. So yeah, this is the gradual getting down to starting to see some shapes emerging. And again, you can only use a point on that and the grinder. Most of the flat chisels were just blunting so quickly, especially with the jackhammer.